Hello and welcome to Attacking Third. We are live on YouTube. We're going to recap Week 11 action in the NWSL. The halfway point is officially here in this season. We've got some games to recap, some surprises maybe along the way. Let us know your reactions to all things Week 11 action in the chat. You know we want to hear from you. Subscribe to us, like this video, and let's go. Hey everyone, and welcome into Attacking Third, a CBS Sports Soccer podcast. I'm Sandra Herrera, lead NWSL writer for CBS Sports, joined today by my special guest, Jordan Angeli, NWSL analyst, and we are going to recap all of the Week 11 action that we just witnessed across NWSL. A quick reminder before we take a deep dive into everything to go ahead and subscribe to us on YouTube. Also, as a podcast, so go ahead and follow, like, and download so that you never miss out on a single episode. Jordan, we're back at it. How you doing tonight?
I'm good. That weekend went quick.
It always does, actually.
Gosh.
Like whenever we do these, it's like, oh, we're back at it. That's how I always tee us up. I'm like, we're back at it, because it's like we blinked and then here we are.
Here we are. Goodness gracious. Someone just asked, where is Lisa? Great question. She's like in Bora Bora or something.
Yeah.
She's enjoying her honeymoon, which she very much should. So I get to be the Lisa still for a few more days, but it's been so fun, Sandra. And gosh, I like the schedule, how when it's broken up like this with games Friday, Saturday, Sunday. It really gives you just a little appetite on Friday, and then really dug in this weekend. But did you have a good weekend?
I had a fantastic weekend. I feel like I say this all the time on this show. I feel like the weather finally matches up with the calendar out here. Good vibes, good energy. Lots of especially lots of pride games throughout the weekend for NWSL. So that's always fun to see and celebrate and see how teams you throw their theme nights. And I got to take in this Chicago game in person, and we'll definitely recap that. There's some things to talk about there for sure. But we should probably start with the games that are probably most fresh on everyone's mind. So shout out to everyone joining us live. Jordan already acknowledging the chat. Just a reminder to everyone, we do these live. So make sure you subscribe so that you get those notifications that whenever we do go live with the recaps or the previews, and you could join us and have some fun with the conversation. Let's start with a 1-1 draw with Houston Dash versus Gotham FC. Jordan, I got the picks here for us. We're going to go through these as well. Wow. We both had Gotham picks as the winners, that they were going to go into Houston and walk away with all 3 points. But that wasn't the case in this game. A 1-1 draw. Some interesting stretches of the game here for sure. We had a wild finish, 12 added minutes of stoppage time. Thought we were going to get a game winner, but that did not happen. Does 1-1 feel like an accurate representation of this game for you?
Not really, honestly. The second half, I feel like Houston should have gone away with it. They did a really good job throughout the entire game of utilizing the space in the channels and going 1v1 against Gotham's outside backs. And I remember talking to you about this last week, is the goal that San Diego Wave scored against Gotham is is a new outside back, and there's going to be some growing pains in that. And I think we saw that a few times here again tonight. Houston did a really good job of utilizing the channels. That's where they get their goal from. It's Alozie, who was just burning people left and right today. Probably should have had a couple of goals along with her assist. One of them gets called off due to VAR. That's why we had such long stoppage time at the end of the second half. But I thought Alozie did really well. Maria Sanchez. Houston has had a soft spot, because if they are going to be a crossing team, they need someone to get to the near post. And that's what Sanchez did for this goal, to put Dash up. And I loved it. Gotham gets one back off of penalty kick. Lynn Williams, of course, added another to her tally. But I really liked how Houston played. I think this is one where everybody who watched this game could say, like, why are we playing games in Houston before 7:30 p.m.? Because the first half, you could probably throw it away. It was just like everybody looked exhausted. It looked too hot. It was hard to watch because half the field was shaded, half the field was bright. My eyes were like, what's going on? And the players played like that. I've been in games there where you're waiting for shade to go over the entire field, because then you feel like you can breathe and play. And the second half gave a lot of that life. Both teams much better, held the ball up better, were able to create some attacks. But I think it could have very easily been 2-2, both teams at the crossbar or a post in very difficult transition or good transition moments. But I felt like Houston is going to leave there thinking, man, we should have had our second win in a row at home against a really good Gotham's team who now back-to-back games haven't shown, I think, what we saw from them pretty consistently of how good they can be through the press. They struggled with the press from Houston today.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought in stoppage time there, it was another example of just maybe things not going Houston's way a little bit. I mean, this opportunity that they had early in stoppage time where Schmidt is facing nearly a wide open net, and this attempt that she takes hits the crossbar, and I thought, gosh, that's the game winner right there, and it just doesn't end up happening, working out for them. I love you mentioning Maria Sanchez, just to bring a little bit of the preview on here. I remember when we were talking about making picks for this game that when it came to Houston's attack, that we felt that she's probably been the most consistent component of that attack for Houston, and if there's a way that Gotham could sort of game plan for that they'll have a way to perhaps try to eliminate maybe some of the threat for the goal scoring in this game. But it's irony at its best, right? That we talk a bit about that, and then she's not only the player that helps generate attacks, but facilitates this goal. She continues to run and then gets that breakthrough. But it just sort of felt like maybe that second one was going to come for this team, but it just didn't pan out their way, and it doesn't really do too much for them in terms of the actual final result, the standings. And I think we'll talk about this throughout the episode a bit, because we're talking about wrapping up week 11, and it's officially the point in the season where every single club, all 12 teams, are tapping into the halfway point of a 22 game season. And I think when you kind of make note of that as a player or your coaching staff, you look ahead to this second half of the season maybe a little bit differently than you did in that first. The games maybe have a little bit of a different sense of urgency to them. I think especially when you kind of have these moments where you have two teams going head to head. Maybe it's not two teams in the upper half of the table, but maybe it's an upper half team and that team that is trying to leapfrog into that upper half. And you have a game like this where maybe feels kind of entertaining at times, but there ultimately ends up not being a winner.
Yeah, I do think the pressure is more on the team that needs to find themselves up in the standings more so for the Dash here. But I also think for Gotham, what a weird week it was, and how they handled maybe, I don't know the ins and outs. I didn't get to talk to the coaches this weekend because I wasn't on any games, which was a little strange, just from my perspective. But maybe not having the opportunity to train as much, at least out on the pitch, and did that show in some of the things that they were trying to execute on the field, because they never got to go out and do that before they traveled to Houston. So I think that is something I think about. And there is pressure on these teams, and we'll talk about it. But for Houston, I think they're showing signs that this team can create and go forward and wreak some havoc against other squads. And a lot of it has gone around Alozie and her. She flipped a switch and has decided, I'm going to get after players 1v1. And that opens up so many different opportunities to not just get in behind, but then if a defender backs off, there's a passing lane that then is opened up. So when you make defenders make decisions, things start to benefit in your direction. I think that's what we're seeing from Houston.
Yeah. Do you think maybe at some point, like later in the second half of the game, like once you sort of get past that hour mark, that if you're both two teams who are chasing 3 points at that stage of the game, that maybe things could have the possibility of getting a little bit more physical? Because we saw some of the yellow start coming out, towards the latter stage of this game. Do you think like maybe that kind of stuff maybe ends up affecting both sides of the ball here?
Yes, I do. I think so. And both of these teams, I think, weren't going to be happy with the way that they performed in the first half. And that adds to it too, because you want to come in if you are a substitute and be effective and make a difference. I think we see the crazy tackle from Kelly O'Hara. She hasn't played in a while too. So she's going to want to come in and make a difference. And sometimes your timing is off. And so there was a tackle there. I think Chapman always teeters on that edge of, man, this is a wild tackle, or like she times it exactly right. When you teeter that edge, you also get a lot of yellow cards. I think easily she could have had 2 yellows in this game, and it could have been a totally different game. But I do think that the way the first half dictates more what we saw in the second when it comes to the physicality, because if things aren't going right with the way, neither team could hold the ball up. So I think they were thinking, all right, we're not going to get outworked. And sometimes when you have that mentality, you're just going to foul a little bit more. And that's what we saw in the second half. And it resulted in a few yellows.
Yeah, it sure did. But I mean, they split the points in this one. Gotham in fifth, and Houston staying still on the outside, looking in when it comes to the standings at the midway point of the season. Let's talk a little bit about the other game that closed out Sunday evening and Week 11 for NWSL. We got to talk about Orlando Pride versus Portland Thorns. The Pride picking up all 3 points in this because they racked up 3 goals, 3-1. Just like we planned it, Jordan, because of course we both win Thorns in this one. We said, you know what? Orlando's a tough place to play. We're talking in terms of the flora and the fauna there. You know, the temperatures and the humidity sometimes that can come into play when you head into Florida to go and play. But again, just to bring on the preview, we both had Thorns. We talked about the weather that could possibly impact the game, but we also talked about the depth of the benches, and we thought that would be the advantage for the Thorns, and we were incorrect because Orlando said not. Yeah. Today we're going to get back in the win column. That was something else that we chatted a bit about during the preview. We said, listen, they're coming off of a bit of a 2-game skid here after going on a brief unbeaten streak. Maybe this is not the team that they turn things around on. And boy, did they absolutely wake up in this game. You know, Thorns got on the scoreboard first here, though. Yeah, they open up this game with a goal by Sophia Smith. I was curious whether or not that was going to be the moment in which things maybe got out of control for Orlando, but I liked the response. You know, I think there was an opening 20 minutes here in this game where you had 2 teams obviously trying to establish tempo. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, this opening goal for the Thorns comes off of this turnover. Orlando turns this ball. They get fouled. You could sort of see there's like a brief moment of hesitation where perhaps they're looking for a call. It doesn't come. And of course, the Thorns are taking off. Morgan Weaver is able to connect with Sophia Smith, like right inside the box. Like you have Orlando players who don't get all the way back in to cover or mark players. And it just looked too easy for Orlando. And I said, that's unfortunate because at that point you have like almost 20 minutes of play here where maybe either team can finally say, okay, we are going to establish ourselves, assert ourselves here and take over this game. And it was a goal that almost made me feel like this is where it was going to go. But it was so good of a response from the Pride to make sure that this one didn't get away, essentially. And I think, you know, they call that growth, Jordan. You know, I think you look at these clubs that are maybe in the not so much even the bottom, they're the second half of the lower half of the table, but clubs who entered this regular season, year 11, with similar storylines around them in terms of clubs who were going through a rebuild or trying to retool some things or trying to take that first step in this next era of their franchise. And Orlando Pride is one of these clubs. And so to have this kind of quick response and do it with what they've been doing well off of a set piece, because going into this game, 5 of their goals had come off of 7 set piece opportunities, and now they can claim 6 of those with this equalizer from Adriana, who then goes on to extend the lead early in the second half with another brilliant goal, this one coming off of a breakaway. But just good response from Orlando in this game to not let it get away from them, to claim and that home game. And again, we're talking about teams that want to make their environments difficult for the opposition. And I feel like we saw a bit of that tonight.
Yeah, and I think Orlando is trying to just rewrite who they are, especially to their own fans, because this has been a team who over the years has had a lot of big superstars and hasn't lived up to having a lot of big superstars. And now they have the opportunity under Seb Hines to really create the culture that they want. And I was actually in Orlando doing the Orlando City Rapids game on Saturday. So I saw some people associated with the Pride. I saw the Portland Thorns in my hotel. I saw all these people. But what I loved about what I heard from people around the Pride is just the cohesiveness of this group. I think it shows in moments like these. This really reminds me, you're really similar to that game where they got themselves on track is when they won in San Diego, because the same thing, they go down early, but then they respond like, no, this is not going to happen on our watch. And it was through a set piece and through some Adriana like brilliance that they get a result in San Diego. And it's same thing here. I think that this is a squad who can really be good in this league, and they have found their identity. And what's the biggest part about this, it came after a couple of losses, and then they hit one of the hardest teams to beat in this league with a loss after being down. That is some guts and some grit. And I think a part of what Hines and his coaching staff has tried to establish with this team is like, no matter what happens, this is not going to be an easy place to play. And then that gives you credibility with your that gives you people wanting to come back watching game after game. So I'm liking what they're building there. I really am liking what they're building.
No, I agree. I think like even just like kind of the sights and sounds from what we were picking up on the stream, I thought was really good. They were celebrating a Pride out there. It was a really good crowd. It looked like and sounded like in Orlando. And I think that, you feed off of that, right? I think you could attest to that as a former player, and how that kind of maybe changes the mindset or help change the tempo of a game a little bit in terms of that environment. And then, my gosh, you just have a player in Adriana it just seems like week to week for this team is just proving that she was maybe a little bit of an underrated signing for Orlando. I don't know if folks out there anticipated that this was going to be a player for the Pride that kind of would help them kind of turn things around. And I don't mean that in terms of like to sort of say like, oh, like here's a Brazilian player to come in, and of course they're going to cut, they're going to come in with flair and et cetera, right? Like that's not to just sort of like kind of throw those tropes on a player. Like no one wants to do that to a player like this, but I really do feel like with Orlando kind of having the offseason that they had and having struck out on some of those bigger name free agents, it was kind of like, well, what's the next move here for us? Yeah. Who are we going to bring in, to help continue to build what we are trying to build here? Yeah. And Adriana week to week is just showing that she is absolutely that player for them. I mean, her second goal in this game ends up being a bit of of a milestone for the league. Her breakaway goal there was the 100th goal scored by a Brazilian in the NWSL. And I'm just like, that stuff is just so cool when you like see that kind of stat come to like, you don't realize in the moment that a player is maybe making some history in the league, and then boom, there's the fun fact, right? And then for Orlando as a team, in terms of what they're trying to build, they've got 3 home wins for the first time since 2017. And I mean, for folks who don't remember, because it feels like a long time ago, that was the last time Orlando made a postseason, and the only time they ever made a postseason. It was in 2017.
And they have 11 more games to go. Well, not home games, but half of that. Like, they're in a good place when you're talking about only having that many home games and what they're doing.
I love that you brought up that result, against the Wave, because I mean, we're looking at teams who are sitting in different spots on the table. And if this is a second half team, or a lower half table team that can kind of play spoiler a little bit against some of those upper half of the table teams, I think those are like big boosts, for a team that's trying to build things. And I think when you sort of cap off this game by subbing on your rookie who comes in here and just like makes an immediate impact, Messiah Bright just kind of, icing the game with a goal. And while the Thorns, that first goal, I was like, oh, that just looked too easy. Messiah Bright does the same thing against Portland. It makes it look like way too easy. And I'm just like, goodness, Orlando is out here not only putting together good performances, but looking like they're having a lot of fun doing it as well.
Yeah. I mentioned before this game, one last thing is I felt like this was going to be a real big test for Madril and her ability in the back. seems like she stepped up and did a pretty good job managing the front. Not even the front three of Portland, but just everything that they can throw at you.
No, absolutely. And I think for the, on the loss, for the losing side of things in Portland, I think this is, I think this is another game that they have across their, first half of the season to look at and say, there have been some games this season where we've bled some goals.
Yeah.
This Portland Thorns defense, Bella Bixby, the anchor in net there. This is not the first game where they have, let in a significant amount of goals. And I think it's a little bit telling, right? When I think there's maybe the rotation or, the availability for the back line and how they're going to look at things. Menges not available tonight when the start. Sauerbrunn has been someone trying to work her way back, and it's showing. It has showed a bit. I think for this team moving forward. I think maybe it's not something that you necessarily as opposition are going to game plan for, but it's something to take note of. I think at this point in the season.
Yeah, absolutely. I think everybody's looking at what's our depth look like when. There's a lot happening in the next month and they're going to be without players. And so if your depth isn't there now, what's it going to look like in a month, which,
yeah, no, for sure. Something about, I don't know. We'll see. It's Portland. They still stay in the upper half at this halfway point of the season, and Orlando bumped themselves up to number 8 in the standing. So they are sitting in that kind of like middle gray area of the table, which is not a bad place to be, I think, at this stage of the season. So we'll definitely keep an eye on how both of these teams build into their next weeks, but we've got some more games to recap. So stick with us after a quick break.
Get breaking news.
Big news coming out of the NFL today.
Highlights and instant reactions.
The largest final round comeback in tour championship history. We're down to the final 4.
I just want to take time to analyze greatness.
Talk winners and losers with a guy who's already a big winner.
CBS Sports HQ. It's all sports all day long.
All right. We're back. And we got to chat more games. We got to recap some more matches that took place over the weekend in week 11 across NWSL. Let's start this middle of the episode with a lopsided scoreline. We got to talk about Chicago Red Stars and North Carolina Courage going into SeatGeek Stadium, heading out to Bridgeview and throwing out history.
Wow.
Because the Courage have struggled typically on the road against Chicago in this facility, and they said not tonight. They put a 5 spot up on Chicago. Wasn't pretty.
No.
Caroline getting a hat trick in this game. Jordan, I got to tell you, being a local out here, I went out and I went to go take in the game. I said, it's Pride Night for Chicago Red Stars. I want to get out there. I want to see what the fans are excited about, see what the energy they're giving. I saw lots of pine cones, from some of the fans. I loved that. I was like, that's great. Look at this energy. I was like, this is great stuff here. And you look, when we made our picks, I said, you know what? It's hard for me to shake off that record. I think maybe these two teams are going to play a tough game and it could shake out to be a draw.
Yeah.
You said, hey, I think it's going to be a tough game too. I think the Courage are going to get the win. Nowhere in our preview of this, we said it's going to be a lopsided scoreline like this. Tough. Another tough loss for Chicago. We were just talking about how Portland are no strangers to giving up some big scorelines. And at this rate, neither is Chicago, leading the league right now in goals conceded. And I think, something similar in terms of, this previous game that we just recapped between the Pride and Orlando. I got to say, Jordan, being at this game kind of felt a little similarly. It just sort of felt like there was about 20 minutes of just kind of nothing for a little bit, or even the Courage getting on the scoreboard first. They crack open, their goal scoring really early with Caroline in a goal in the 11th minute, and it sort of looked like it woke both teams up a bit.
Yeah.
And you see the Courage thrilled for Caroline, celebrating the goal. You immediately see the Red Stars huddle with each other, and they say, "Hey, let's regroup." and we see another like 25 minutes of kind of nothing.
Yeah.
Really. It just sort of felt kind of like a more methodical type of game. And then right as the half hour mark, ticks past that, you get Guile who gets the go-ahead goal here for the Courage. And this is the moment where you could just sort of tell it gets away from Chicago, because I think they just unfortunately have not been good at this season is, playing from behind. So it's maybe one thing to try to get into a halftime, I think, at this stage of a game, down 1-0. But I think if you're the Chicago Red Stars and you have had to deal with some unfortunate, constant scenarios like this, it feels like maybe another little bit of an unreachable game at this point, sadly. So if you, not only is it 2-0, mere minutes later, Jordan, it's 3-0. So you're talking about going down 3-0 at halftime. I got to ask you, as a former player, Jordan, even if you're not going through historically bad season for your club, how tough is it to go into halftime down 3-0?
Yeah, it's very difficult, because that locker room, is not going to be a happy place, and it's going to be hard to find many bright spots that you can hold on to get things going in the second half. So you're trying to lean on mentality, aggressiveness, trying to be a little bit more physical, break the game up as much as possible. But it's hard. I remember being in locker rooms like that where you just feel like, gosh, the wind is knocked out of you and you can't catch your breath. And this kind of was just honestly the perfect storm, I think, in ways for I mentioned I felt like North Carolina was going to have a heyday in this big field in Chicago. They kept a lot of the ball. I think, in the first 10 minutes, 15 minutes, it was 75% possession, which it was just North Carolina saying, all right, we're going to make you guys work. And the problems for the Red Stars are numerous. I think they didn't do as good of a job of being as compact defensively. And so it allowed them, as they started to defend longer and longer and longer, you get stretched more and more. And that's where North Carolina hurt them, is they were patient in the way they were building up. So then when they found, whether it was space in behind to find Caroline with a run beyond the back line, or then they found a way to go through the middle of the field through O'Sullivan and Narumi and Pickett, I thought that they had really good patience in the way that they built. And that's one of the things that Sean Nahas knew that it was going to take time for this team to click. They didn't score a lot of goals at the beginning of the year, but then they weren't giving up the goals that they were giving up, where they were just giving the ball away. Okay, well, that's one step. Then the possession number started to come, and he was proud about that. And the last thing to come is always goal scoring. It's always final third. And we have seen game in and game out for North Carolina, minus their game last weekend. This team just looks more and more confident when they get into the attacking third and they have answers to questions. And man, they answered a lot of questions.
Oh, boy.
Like Guile's goal is one of my favorites. Her quick turn shot, like it is touch step shot, which is so hard to defend if you're a defender, but also as a goalkeeper, because you don't know if the shot is coming or not. So kudos to North Carolina, but for Chicago, it's tough. Like there's not one answer to this. It's, can you hold the ball up better? Can you be a little bit cleaner coming out of the back? Can your midfield be better at showing and creating options for when you do want to play out of the back? Can you turn a defense over and say, okay, we're not even going to try to connect. We're just going to try to get it in beyond you and use some speed. But you've lost a lot of that speed without Hawking, without Swanson. Yep. It's dire. It's hard for Chicago right now. And I feel for those players, because it doesn't look like they're going to have any relief coming soon, because.
Yeah. Although it's like tough that's the other thing too. Like, it's always very interesting to me to sort of get like the former player's perspective on this. It's like when you have those things that are out of your control, like you have a sale of a club in process that I'm sure they're not getting any updates about, nor is the public at this point, and it's just one of those things where you're just kind of like, okay, well, we've got to go through the motions kind of this season. And I think
one thing can tilt you back to, like, you can feel optimistic and knowing this team and some of the players that are on this team, that they are going to have a good attitude. Like, they have fun. They try to make it light, like with the pine cone, with these things that they're doing. Like, they're bringing a great attitude, but it's almost like I'm going to speak for myself. When I've experienced that, you like fake it until you get to that point where then it tilts again and you feel it falling away from you and you're like, you can't grasp onto anything. Yeah. And I just feel for them.
No, I appreciate it. No, I appreciate that perspective for sure. And I'm sure, everyone else, listening also appreciates it as well. I there's always a possibility. I think when you find, like, again, you're speaking for yourself, so I'm speaking for myself. I think when on my side of things, as like media, when you find yourself, covering a team in a season like this, like there are other things that maybe you go into and try to look for. You try to look for maybe those, those individual performances that you can kind of take away as those silver linings. This was another good game for Kruger as well, and on the back for Chicago, a player covering a lot of ground. And it's one of those things where it's like her good play almost kind of continues to expose a little bit of the problems and the issues on the field. You're kind of like, wow, like look at this defender like playing all and covering all these areas and in these spaces and not only trying to cover and do solid 1v1 defending, but also trying to facilitate attacks, et cetera, et cetera. But I was also really excited to get a look at North Carolina Courage. I'm not going to lie. It was an opportunity to maybe take a look at this team and look at all these pieces and see what they're building as well. Naruma Miura, to get a chance to watch her live and in action. This player, I think when we're looking and talking about, again, teams that are in this phase of a season where they are trying to go and build something new and build something to last, kind of, this next window, kind of what is this next window going to look for us and how are we going to compete in it? This is a player that was such a good pickup for them, because I think you can kind of connect that to Chicago as well, like how they lost their midfield essentially. Yeah. A midfield that was like basically one of the top 4 midfields in the league. And now you lose all those pieces. And then you have a Courage side that, has typically valued possession and has played strong in the middle. What are you going to do to make sure that, Denise O'Sullivan or Meredith Speck, these players kind of have other outlets to continue to build through? And Miura is such a valued piece in retaining that possession. It was like watching it live. I was like, we already know it and see it when we're calling these games or covering these games. But there's something about taking it live where you're just like, oh my goodness, like this player is fantastic. Just quietly doing their job at like every turn. The goals that came out of this game from Caroline were outstanding. Full stop. Absolutely. But this link up between Miura and O'Sullivan, there was like this ridiculous give and go, like inside the box, that leads to another goal for the Courage. And I was just like, this is great for this team. They're absolutely going to take this and, build on it and moving forward. So I'm with you. It was just, unfortunately, just one of these games where you look at, it's very tough for Chicago. And like you said, you feel for a team like that, but then you look at the Courage and you say they're right on the path, or staying the course in terms of what they are trying to build week in and week out. And it's tough to see a scoreline like that right in front of a World Cup, and you have your USA number 1 and Alyssa Nair. But I will say this, getting to go to the game, you get to, chat with players post game and as part of media responsibilities. And she's the captain of this team and has, been in the front of these microphones during these tough losses, and kind of echoing what you have already stated, Jordan, about kind of trying to make sure you don't get too high on the highs, because they did have 2 consecutive regular season wins, and now they've got a big lopsided loss, and how important it wasn't to stay too high in the highs or to really stay too low in the lows. And a game like this obviously has plenty of footage for them to go through and comb through and try to continue to work on. So I think when it comes to being a goalkeeper in general, but especially in this league, you have to have probably those really strong mental components in your game, right? Yeah. And I think Alyssa Naeher, if nothing else, is listening to her in some of these post games and some of these really tough losses. You could tell she hasn't lost any of that. So I think that those are little things I think you try to take away from in games like this. But all 3 points belong to the Courage, and of course all the goals as well. It keeps them in the upper half of the table. At the halfway point of the season, they are at number 6, Chicago in 10th at this point. So again, you're looking at small silver linings here. I guess you're not completely looking at the bottom at this point. Let's pivot to OL Reign versus Kansas City Current. We've got a win to discuss for the Reign. 2-1 at home against the Current. A little tricky there. I thought maybe the Current were going to give them a little bit of a run here, but you and I both going for the Reign in our preview, Jordan, and they came through for us. We'll just say that. They were like, yes, we heard you picked us, so we're gonna pull through for you. But maybe let's start with one of the big things that came out of this game very, very early on in this game. Megan Rapinoe exits out of the match, and of course, lots of worry, lots of raised eyebrows, perked up ears, wide eyes. What could it all mean? What does it mean? But it looked like her exit from the game was very, very early. It looked like she walked off on her own, exited to the locker room, came back and was back on the bench, rooting on her teammates there. And I believe in post game, it looks like it was ported out of there that in terms of a status, it didn't seem. The impression was that it was not something worrisome. Right. But I think, again, we're talking about phases of a season. And while it's the halfway point, it's also about 40-ish days to a World Cup. But yeah, the clock is ticking for sure. And I think folks are definitely keeping an eye on that. But it seems from what came out of the game as if it's not something that is urgent or worrisome at this moment.
I just think it shows the fragility of Rapinoe, though, at this stage of her career. She started off the season not being able to play, really eased back in slowly. So if I'm Vlatko, I'm thinking, goodness, I don't know. Like, even and her role is going to be very different on that team than it is on this Reign team, where she's starting every game, that she's available and she's trying to play significant minutes. But on the World Cup team, she's maybe coming in for 10 minutes. Yeah. So if you have someone that you're using one of your last subs to come in for 10 minutes and you don't know if they can go 10 minutes because injuries are popping up time and time again, that's going to put some questions in your mind. Like, is it worth, are we going to have to call on her in these moments? And if we are, is she going to be able to make it through 10 to 20 minutes? I'm not saying she is or isn't. I'm just saying those could be the questions he could be asked right now. Or do you bring a player that you know is going to be, that's younger, fitter, healthier? Doesn't have
I don't think those are unfair questions.
Yeah.
Those are all realistic game related scenario type of questions. Yeah. This is in fairness to Rapinoe. I mean, this is a player who has who has come on later for them, kind of in that second quarter of the season, was building more minutes, had some of these breakout games, top performances. You lose a player like that so early in this game, it's like you look to it and you're like, who's going to take over, right? And it turns out it was Sofia Huerta in this game. That was delightful. Converts the penalty kick that comes just past the half-hour mark in that first half. Lovely little halftime interview where she's just like, I just kind of had to black out for a second and then go ahead and convert it.
Oh yeah, I forgot that the whistle blew.
Yeah, and it didn't matter. Back of the net, they're up 1-0 at the half. But she also responsible for this go-ahead goal in the 68th minute. Delivers a dime for Jordan Huitema to knock away in the back of the net. And at this point, it's 2-0 for the Reign, which at that stage of the game, you feel good about. Maybe you could just sort of close things out and go ahead and control the game. But the Current didn't want to make it too easy for the Reign. A stoppage time goal, 90 plus 1 minute. Izzy Rodriguez getting one back for the Current in this one. Look, these are two. We talked about this in the preview, Jordan. We said how these were two teams that they went head to head in the semifinals in 2022, and they went on the road and they really took it to the Reign. And they aren't two teams that are unfamiliar with playing tough games against each other. So to see this one kind of shake out to a narrow scoreline after losing such a big player on the pitch and not having Jess Fishlock available, another game without Rose Lavelle. Perhaps it's another one of these games where, it's an example of the depth of the bench on this team.
Yeah. It is. And I think that it also shows just Laura Harvey and the tactical mind that OL Reign had, and to really work the channels and use they love crossing with Sofia Huerta, but they were very dominant in crossing with Sofia Huerta against this Current squad because they know that they're not very good at defending in those areas, but also too at denying the crosses. And I've loved we've seen it more often. Laura Harvey starting with Huitema up top and Balcer underneath, and I liked this Bennett up top, Huitema underneath. And one of the things that Jordyn Huitema loves to do in her game is she wants to play in the midfield. She wants to connect the lines. She wants to be that player who is the pivotal player when you're saying literally pivoting the game from defense to offense, from the midfield to the attack. So playing her in that position, I think, allows her to do that, and then allows her to get in on a late run and just beast mode a header. I mean, I loved this header. This is what we should be seeing of Jordyn Huitema all the time. And one of the reasons why when I call games, I'm like, I want more from Jordyn Huitema, because this is more from her and how good she can be in these moments. So I loved that goal. But I still feel like the Current are feeling more like themselves, and they find opportunities to defend well as a group. They made it difficult on the Reign for a good portions of these games, but then could get in counterattack situations. Good to see Morgan Gautrat get back on the field. Yeah. Like this Current squad, if they had everyone healthy from the beginning, I think we'd be whistling a different tune. And we might be in 6 weeks, because that's what they like to do to us, is come on in the season.
We've been talking about it all episode, folks. I mean, the halfway point resets some things for clubs out there, and who knows, maybe with this next 11 weeks, we're going to see the Current put things together now that maybe their availability reports look a little bit different. But we'll see. Unfortunately,
and Ball got back as well. I should say that, because
that's important to know. There's so many pieces, right? You're like, oh yeah, that's right. And then they've also got so-and-so making the return.
Who hasn't even played.
I know.
Not any.
They made that early decision, with her, and who knows if there's a possibility to have her, have an impact towards the latter stage of the season. Yeah. But the road loss means, unfortunately, they stay still at the bottom of the table. The Reign currently at 4th. They still are sitting in the upper half of the table. They haven't really dropped out of the upper half since the start of the season. But we'll see how both teams respond in week 12. And we've got 2 more games to recap. Okay, so stick with us. Don't go anywhere. We're going to wrap it all up right after a quick break.
Absolutely magisterial here.
All right, everybody, welcome back in. We appreciate you all joining us tonight after the games on a Sunday evening. We see the chat going. Reminder, just subscribe to us on YouTube. You'll get those notifications for whenever we go live, and you can hop on in and join into the conversation, because we see a very active chat tonight. We appreciate you. Shout out to Celeste. My shirt says, Mas amor, por favor. Love to have more love, and especially during Pride, of course. Let's close it out, Jordan. Let's recap these games. We've got to talk about Racing Louisville versus San Diego Wave. We had different picks in this one in our preview. I went racing. I was hoping they would come out here and make things difficult for the Wave, and they did in some aspects, but not enough to pull out the win. But they did enough to pull out the draw, and that's the pick that you had. So congrats on getting the pick right. Scoreless between these two teams. This was the game that kicked off Week 11 action. So we got to throw it back a little bit. We're talking about Friday. We're on Sunday. Jordan, your impressions of these games that took place on Friday?
I thought this game was asking for a little bit more, but San Diego has done such a good job under Casey Stoney of establishing that they're going to be very difficult to break down. And I thought that against Louisville, they were in this mid block that was hard for Louisville to get some of their momentum that they typically get through the lines. They can play through a press and then let DeMello and other players eat up some of that space that's then created as a team's retreating. And you didn't see that very often in this game. So I would say credit to San Diego, just how they had their structure. I'm going to talk about Jaden Shaw playing in this game. I almost cried about how good that ball was at halftime that she played into Jakobsen, and Jakobsen has to score that. And I think I don't know how she doesn't, because she scores those goals like typically in her career all the time. But Jaden Shaw's ability on the ball is just so much better than I think any of us realize. That she sees things clearly. She had a no-look pass at one time to break the line as well. She's just so clean and intelligent. She played as a false nine in this, so she picked up the ball a lot and connected the lines. I just think that we are seeing a great player be developed in front of our eyes, and don't sleep on her. Like, don't sleep on watching her do things that are great, but also make mistakes and learn from them, because I think that's one of the things that is so beneficial for these young players too. So I thought she played really well and was a good key piece in what San Diego was trying to do. But not too much in this game. A couple of good saves, but I think it was more the structure of what San Diego had. Louisville still managed to have some good buildups, and I do like what they're doing. I love me some Wong Chuang. She has been great, and it was great to see Katlana from the beginning, and she's going to be a game changer for them, just with her speed and intelligence at high pace. You know how difficult that is, Sandra? And
we were talking about on the preview a bit when we were making our picks and going through the rundown of Week 11 matches. And I said in our preview of this game, I was like, man, I'm really curious if this is the game where Katlana's going to get involved and really cause some trouble for the opposition, because this is a player that they signed last year, unfortunately was not able to impact the team, had suffered the devastating injury that ended up keeping her out of the rest of I believe it was a Africa Cup, and then was unable to even play a single minute for racing. So it is this type of player that you just have sort of been waiting to see, I think, if you're a racing fan. And I loved this game. I loved her effort in this game. Absolutely. I think you look at a score line like this, 0-0, and you wonder, well, did anything happen? But I think there were stretches of this game where you could look at both sides of the ball and sort of see each team kind of showing their strengths a little bit at times. Unfortunately, just wasn't enough to, I guess, ever find the breakthrough for either side, and they split the points in this one. But yeah, with you 100% on Jaden Shaw. This is a player I know you've got wanting to go to the World Cup, and I don't know if that's going to be a possibility in this one, but I think this is absolutely a player that you're calling into the senior team post World Cup. I think enough with the the U20 Collins. This is where it's got to be for her moving forward. Yeah. And so, and for racing, I think, this is a team that is no stranger to draws, unfortunately. It's a team that got a lot of draws in 2022, and they're still showing that they're capable of picking up those results. But I think when you're a team that's trying to build something and you're going up against teams who are in that upper half of the table, you want to show that you can put together that 90-minute game and walk away with that win versus just that result. I think that's going to be that final piece for them, where they're just going to say, yes, we have fun, we're competitive, but we're also to be taken seriously.
Yeah.
And we can get this win. And I think that type of respect kind of comes when you have these games against those kind of competitor, contender type of teams moving forward. So, we'll see how, what a result like this can maybe mean for them past, the halfway point into week 12, and how they can build off of that. And for San Diego, it just kind of keeps them racking up these results, undefeated in their last 5. It keeps them at the top of the table. They are the new number ones going into the second half of the season. So congratulations to them with 20 points. Let's close out with the last game to recap. We have to talk about Washington Spirit versus Angel City. 2-1 by way of Washington. They get all 3 points in this one. For the picks, Jordan, you were hoping that this was going to be the game. Angel City was able to turn things around. Fortunately, it's not. I narrowly went with there. I'll put myself on blast. I didn't make that pick confidently. I said, I think there's enough here for the Spirit to get that win. But I said I wasn't confident about that pick. And I think this is a game that I think I still stand corrected at that. Yes, they got the 2 goals and the 3 points. But, you wonder, I think you look at Angel City and where they are, not only in the table, but, where they are in terms of their performances at this point in the league, right? The halfway point. And I don't know if there's a streakier team in the league right now, Jordan. I think it's funny to even say that, because it's like, oh, they're coming off of 3 losses, at this point, how streaky can they be? But I'm talking about some of these stretches of waves of performances that we see from them throughout the game. Yeah. I think their last result they got was a draw 4 weeks ago. And then they go into DC, a long road trip. Yeah, for them. Not easy conditions, right? We've been hearing all about the wildfires and the effect on the East Coast. The Spirit lost a day of training due to that. We heard that come out of reporting as well. And maybe that had something to do with some of the close and narrow moments in this game between these two sides. Because when we're looking just even at the first half alone, perhaps this game was done and dusted just with 45 minutes. Yeah. Hard to really gauge. I think if we're thinking back on it, but you've got Hatch getting on the scoreboard just past the half-hour mark. Sanchez finally gets a breakthrough with this ridiculous ball from Paige Meditaire. Just perfect delivery, really. And Sanchez there to put it away, far post. 2-0 heading towards halftime, but Angel City showing this fight, showing this effort. Emme Vignola finally getting and on the score sheet in this one. The assist coming from Claire Emsley. Just a lot of, I think, just kind of goal that you just see kind of manifested out of some just hustle type of play, right, from this team. And I think that's a player that has kind of shown in some of these performances in Angel City, the player that is just going to like put their head down to the ground and just go. And you're trying to look for those players. You're trying to look for those silver linings with Angel City and kind of these tough results that they're suffering, and from a kind of, you want to try to build off of that. But this is all in the first half. And then we've got nothing in the second half. And I'm just kind of like, okay, well, maybe I don't know if I would say it was a tale of two halves, but maybe if it's a tale of two halves for both teams, not just one here.
Yeah, the thing that's difficult about this Angel City team is, I don't know why I'm getting, there we go. I developed an echo. Sorry, Sandra. This Angel City team they are streaky within games. And I think what is confusing to people is you see them do things and build out of the back or create an attack. And it's Thompson coming in and then finding a midfielder, switching the point of attack. It's like beautiful soccer and moments within each game where I think you can say, okay, well, we know that they have that in them. And then it'll be the start of an attack and it just totally breaks down once it gets to the attacking third. Their last couple of games, I can speak even just this week, they played later in the week, so then they have less rest and maybe it's less time to prep. But you just mentioned Washington had a day less to prep, at least out on the field as well. Angel City expected goals. They've beaten other teams game in and game out. Like I can think a couple of games on hand where they've had good amount of expected goals. And this one, they had 2.5, almost 2.5 expected goals for. So it's not as if they aren't creating. It's they're getting 19 shots, but only 4 on target. Like, how can they manage to get those shots into a better place where they're challenging a goalkeeper? You know, even for Washington, the goal that goes off the crossbar and then is scored by Hatch, like, that's probably not a high percentage shot that is going to increase your expected goals, but they ended up converting it. So those are the situations that I think are a little bit different for Angel City right now. They're probably going to feel like they're not as lucky as other teams. But I think that everybody is talking about Angel City right now because we're confused as to why a team with some of the players that they have are not getting results. So yeah, there's some issues that they need to wring out and make sure that when they get themselves in the attacking third, they're having better opportunities, shots on, and getting them on frame.
Yeah. You know, I think in the preview, I'd asked you, you know, this, and we talked about, you know, how maybe this is a crucial point for teams in the season, hitting that halfway mark. And that is what we're seeing with Angel City, you know, and a coaching staff issue. Like, are the tactics just not translating to the players or vice versa? And, you know, you mentioned, and I agreed with it, we just didn't really maybe see that a change would happen at that level for the team. But it does make me curious about it, because this is a franchise maybe in a little bit of a different situation than maybe perhaps say like Chicago, for example. I think it's easy to maybe look at Chicago struggles, see like, oh, like someone's head needs to roll and blah, blah, blah. But you have to maybe look at the circumstances and how they're a little different. Like, you've got a franchise, again, like we talked about, that's in the process of being sold or looking for a new owner, a new buyer. They don't have a GM at the moment. You know, who's going to make those decisions? There's actually really no one there to make those decisions. Yeah. So Chicago is trying to hold things together as best as they can, versus Angel City. They've got a roster, they've got players, they've got talent, they've got resources by everything that we hear. They've got investment, and
have showed their ambition via a documentary on who they are. You know, like,
you could catch that on HBO Max, right? We talk all about it all the time, and I think maybe it's because of those things like that you've mentioned and I'm mentioning now, that folks are kind of like, well, if it wouldn't like a sports decision like have been made at this point, but you know, kudos to Cumin, and I believe shout out to Theo. I think he asked in the post game about that. Just, you know, is she feeling pressures or anything at this point in the season? And she very diplomatically just kind of said, you know, her focus has to be on the team and making sure, you know, to get results. And again, I think you talk about trying to control those uncontrollables, and I think those are one of those things. You know, I think if you're the coach, and I think no one knows better than the coach that if the results aren't coming, you have to be the one to try to unlock those things. So I'm curious to see if when that game is going to come for Angel City. When is that result going to come where it sort of feels like they're going to turn things around? Because it kind of feels like, you know, even though it's only the halfway point, perhaps they might, they might run out of time, because there's also a World Cup here, and they're going to lose a lot of players. And when those players return, they might not be available right away. So there's kind of there's a mixed bag right now, I think, when it comes to LA. So we'll have to keep an eye on it and see, you know, how they respond moving forward. But it's a big win for the Spirit, essentially. Both Sanchez and Hatch finally getting on the scoreboard. I know we mentioned in the preview that we wanted to see those two players, you know, have an impact and within the game. Looks like they did. The win keeps them in the upper half of the table. They also are level with San Diego with 20 points, but the tiebreakers keep them at number 2. And the loss for Angel City, unfortunately, puts them in 11th place at this moment. So we'll see how teams respond in week 12. But that is a wrap for us tonight on A3. Thanks, everybody, for joining and listening to Attacking Third. We appreciate you coming through, as always. Download, follow, listen to us anywhere you get your podcast. You can watch us too. So subscribe at youtube.com/Attacking Third. And we'll be back on Tuesday with more content for you. For Sandra Herrera and Jordan Angeli, this was Attacking Third.